The stagecoach rattled into Enid, Oklahoma on a blistering afternoon in June 1889, carrying among its passengers a young woman whose eyes had forgotten how to hold trust. Amelia Porter clutched her carpetbag so tightly her knuckles had turned bone white, and when the driver offered his hand to help her down, she flinched so violently he stepped back with his palms raised. "My apologies, miss," he said quietly, and Amelia felt shame burn through her chest even as she climbed down without assistance, nearly stumbling in her haste to avoid his touch. The main street of Enid stretched before her in a chaos of hastily constructed buildings, their raw lumber still golden in the harsh sunlight. The town had sprung up practically overnight after the land run just 2 months prior, and everywhere she looked, men swarmed like ants, hammering, hauling, shouting, claiming. The sight made her stomach twist into knots. She pressed herself against the side of the general store, trying to make herself small, invisible. "You look lost." The voice came from her left, low and careful, and Amelia jerked away so fast her carpetbag tumbled into the dust. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she took in the man standing a respectful distance away. He was tall, built solid like the cottonwoods that lined the creek beds, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in winter. A weather-beaten hat shaded his face, and dust covered his boots up to the ankles. Everything about him screamed danger to her frayed nerves. "I did not mean to startle you," he said, and his hands hung loose at his sides, nowhere near the gun belt at his waist. "Name is Garrett Vance. I run the horse ranch about 3 miles north of here." Amelia's throat had gone so tight she could barely breathe, let alone speak. She pressed harder against the storefront, wishing she could melt into the wood. Garrett's expression shifted, something like understanding crossing his weathered features. He took a careful step backward. "You are safe here, I promise you that. Are you looking for someone? The boarding house, maybe?" She managed a jerky nod, still unable to form words. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. "It's just down the street, the white building with the green shutters. Mrs. Campbell runs it. She is good people." He bent slowly, telegraphing every movement, and picked up her fallen carpetbag. Instead of approaching her, he set it down halfway between them and stepped back again. "You take care now, miss." He tipped his hat and walked away, his boots raising small clouds of red Oklahoma dust with each step. Amelia watched him go, her chest heaving with the effort of holding back tears. When he disappeared into the crowd, she finally moved, snatching up her bag and hurrying in the direction he had indicated. Mrs. Campbell was indeed good people. She was a round woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen enough of life to recognize suffering when it stood on her doorstep. She asked no questions, simply showed Amelia to a small, clean room on the second floor and brought her a basin of water and a plate of cold chicken and biscuits. "You rest up, dear," she said gently. "Town's growing fast, and there's work aplenty if you are looking. The new schoolhouse needs a teacher, the restaurant needs waitresses, and the dress shop just opened up needing a seamstress." After she left, Amelia sat on the narrow bed and let herself cry for the first time since leaving Missouri. She had thought she could outrun what had happened to her there, that a fresh start in newly opened Oklahoma territory would somehow make her whole again. But the fear had traveled with her, embedded in her bones like shrapnel. She had been working as a seamstress in her aunt's dress shop in St. Joseph when 3 men had broken in after hours. They had been looking for the money they knew her aunt kept in the back room. They had found Amelia instead, working late to finish a wedding dress. What they did to her had shattered something fundamental inside, some basic trust in the world that she did not know how to rebuild. Her aunt had been kind but useless, full of platitudes about time healing all wounds and finding the right man someday. The sheriff had been worse, asking questions that made her feel dirty, that implied somehow she had invited the violence. So when the land run opened up Oklahoma territory, Amelia had scraped together every penny she had and bought a ticket west, desperate for a place where nobody knew her story. She had not expected to find that men everywhere looked the same when filtered through the lens of her trauma. The next morning, she forced herself downstairs. Mrs. Campbell introduced her to the other boarders at breakfast, 3 older women who worked at the restaurant, and a young married couple who had claimed land south of town. Amelia kept her eyes on her plate and spoke only when directly addressed. "You should talk to Mrs. Henderson about the teaching position," one of the restaurant women said. "She has been interviewing candidates, but none of them have worked out so far. Can you read and write proper?" "Yes," Amelia said quietly. "I finished school through the 8th grade, and I have been tutoring younger children back home." That was a stretch of the truth. She had tutored her cousin's children a handful of times. But desperation made liars of honest people, and she needed work, needed purpose, needed something to fill the hollow hours. Mrs. Henderson lived in one of the nicer homes at the edge of town, a 2-story house with a covered porch and actual glass in all the windows. She was a thin, stern woman with iron gray hair pulled into a merciless bun, and she looked Amelia up and down with an assessing eye that made her want to squirm. "Teaching is not for the faint of heart," Mrs. Henderson said crisply. "We have nearly 40 children in this town already, ranging from age 5 to 15. Most of them are rougher than sandpaper, especially the boys. They need a firm hand and a sharp mind. You possess both." "I will do my best," Amelia said, which was the only honest answer she had. Mrs. Henderson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "School starts Monday. You will teach 6 days a week, 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. The pay is $30 a month plus Sundays off. The schoolhouse is the building near the church. It still smells like fresh paint, so keep the windows open." Amelia felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. $30 was more than she had made at the dress shop, and teaching would keep her busy, keep her mind occupied with something other than the darkness that crept in whenever she was idle. She spent the rest of the week preparing, using some of her precious savings to buy paper, pencils, and a few basic textbooks from the general store. The schoolhouse was indeed new, a simple rectangular building with rows of rough wooden desks and a blackboard at the front. Someone had left wildflowers in a jar on the teacher's desk, and the small kindness made her throat tighten. On Monday morning she arrived early, her stomach a tangle of nerves. The children began trickling in as the church bell struck 8, eyeing her with the frank curiosity of the young. Some were scrubbed clean, their hair neatly combed. Others looked like they had rolled out of bed and come straight to school without bothering with such niceties. The older boys lounged in the back row, arms crossed, expressions challenging. Amelia took a deep breath and wrote her name on the blackboard. "Good morning. I am Miss Porter and I will be your teacher. We are going to start by having everyone introduce themselves and tell me what grade you belong in." The morning went better than she had feared. The younger children were eager and sweet, the middle ones restless but manageable. It was the older boys who tested her, whispering among themselves, dropping books loudly, snickering at everything she said. By lunchtime, she had a throbbing headache and was questioning every decision that had brought her to this moment. During the afternoon arithmetic lesson, one of the boys in the back stood up abruptly. He was perhaps 14, all gangly limbs and adolescent swagger. "This is stupid." I did not come to Oklahoma Territory to sit in a schoolhouse doing baby sums. My pa needs me at the claim. Then I suggest you speak with your father and Mrs. Henderson about withdrawing from school, Amelia said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. But while you are in this classroom, you will sit down and do the work assigned. The boy took a step toward her desk, and Amelia felt the familiar spike of panic shoot through her veins. Her vision narrowed, her breathing went shallow, and for a moment she was back in that dress shop in Missouri, cornered and terrified. Tommy Brennan, you sit yourself down this instant. The voice came from the doorway, and both Amelia and the boy turned to see Garrett Vance standing there, his frame nearly filling the entrance. He was not wearing his gun belt, Amelia noticed, and his hat was in his hands. But there was something about the way he stood, the quiet authority in his voice, that made the boy deflate instantly. "Yes, sir, Mr. Vance," Tommy muttered, slouching back to his seat. Garrett nodded once, then turned his attention to Amelia. "My apologies for interrupting, Miss Porter. Mrs. Henderson asked me to drop off some additional supplies she thought you might need. I will just leave them here by the door." He set down a crate containing more paper, chalk, and several books, then tipped his hat to her and left as quietly as he had arrived. Amelia stared after him, her heart still pounding but for different reasons now. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident, and when she dismissed the children at 3, she found the crate he had left contained not just school supplies but also a jar of honey, a sack of peppermints, and a note in careful handwriting. "For the hard days, G.V." Something small and warm unfurled in her chest, though she immediately tried to smother it. Kindness meant nothing. Men could be kind one moment and monstrous the next. She had learned that lesson in blood and bruises. But over the following weeks, Garrett Vance kept appearing at the edges of her life, always careful, always respectful of her space. She would find her water bucket filled in the mornings before school started. The broken step on the schoolhouse porch was repaired overnight. Once, when a rattlesnake slithered too close to the schoolyard during recess, Garrett appeared seemingly out of nowhere, dispatched it quickly, and left before she could even thank him. "He does that," Mrs. Campbell said one evening over supper when Amelia finally mentioned it. "Garrett looks after people. Lost his whole family to influenza when he was just 16. Since then, he has been the kind of man who makes sure others do not suffer if he can prevent it." "He makes me nervous," Amelia admitted quietly, and it was only a partial lie. He did make her nervous, but not entirely for the reasons she expected. Mrs. Campbell's expression softened. "I do not know what happened to you, dear, and I will not pry, but I will tell you this. Garrett Vance is one of the good ones. He has never raised his hand to anyone who did not deserve it, and he treats women with more respect than most men treat their own mothers. If he is looking after you, you are safe as houses." Amelia wanted to believe that, but belief required trust, and trust was a currency she no longer possessed. The first real conversation she had with Garrett came in late July, nearly 6 weeks after her arrival in Enid. She had stayed late at the schoolhouse, working on lesson plans for the following week, and had not noticed the sun sinking toward the horizon. When she finally locked the door and turned toward town, she found the main street largely deserted, shadows pooling between the buildings like spilled ink. Her steps quickened automatically, her hand clutching the key so hard it bit into her palm. She was halfway to the boarding house when 3 men stepped out of the saloon, their laughter loud and their gaits unsteady. They were not blocking her path, not really, but the sight of them made her freeze like a rabbit in tall grass. "Well, hello there, schoolteacher," one of them called, his words slurring together. "You are out late. Amelia could not move, could not speak, could not do anything but stand there with her heart trying to hammer its way out of her chest. The men started walking toward her, and she knew with terrible certainty that she was about to break apart completely. Then Garrett was there, his horse materializing out of the gathering dusk. He dismounted smoothly and positioned himself between Amelia and the men, his body angled to block their view of her. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his tone conversational but carrying an edge that could cut glass. "I believe you were heading in the opposite direction." The men grumbled but changed course, clearly unwilling to challenge him. Garrett did not move until they had disappeared around a corner, then turned slowly to face Amelia. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, despite the lingering heat of the day. "Miss Porter," he said gently. "Amelia." "Can you hear me?" She managed a nod, though she could not quite focus on his face. Everything was fuzzy around the edges, her vision tunneling. "I am going to walk you back to Mrs. Campbell's," Garrett continued in that same careful tone. "I will stay on this side of the street and you can stay on that side. I just want to make sure you get home safely. Is that all right?" Another nod. He kept his word, walking parallel to her on the opposite side of the street, leading his horse by the reins. He did not try to talk to her, did not ask questions, just maintained that steady presence until she reached the boarding house. Only when she was on the porch, one hand on the door, did he speak again. "You are safe now. Get some rest." She watched him walk away, and something cracked in the armor she had built around herself. The next evening, when she finished at the schoolhouse, she found him sitting on the steps of the church across the way, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up when she emerged, raised a hand in greeting but made no move to approach. After a moment of internal struggle, Amelia crossed the distance between them. She stopped a good 10 feet away, maintaining her buffer of safety, and said, "You do not have to watch over me." "I know," Garrett said simply. He brushed wood shavings off his pants and stood, tucking the knife away. "But I am going to anyway, at least until you tell me to stop." "Why?" The question burst out of her, raw and confused. "You do not even know me." "I know enough." His eyes were steady on hers, no pity in them, which she appreciated more than he could possibly understand. "I know you are scared. I know something happened that hurt you badly. And I know you came here hoping for a fresh start, same as most folks in this town. You deserve to feel safe while you figure things out." Amelia felt tears prickling behind her eyes. "I do not know if I will ever feel safe again." "You might not," Garrett agreed, and his honesty was somehow comforting. "But you might. Either way, you should not have to be afraid every time you walk home in the evening." For the next week, he was there when she finished each day, a quiet presence that asked nothing of her. Sometimes he whittled, sometimes he read a newspaper, sometimes he just watched the town go about its business. He never approached, never intruded, just existed in her peripheral vision like a guardian spirit. On the 8th evening, Amelia crossed the street and sat down on the church steps, leaving a careful 3 feet of space between them. Garrett's hand stilled on his whittling, but he did not look at her, did not react in any way that might spook her. "There were 3 of them," she heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. "They broke into my aunt's dress shop in Missouri. I was working late. They wanted money, but they took other things too." Garrett's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek, but his voice remained gentle. "I am sorry that happened to you. I thought coming here would help. New place, new people, new start. But I am still afraid all the time. Every man I see, I wonder if he is capable of that kind of violence. If he is just waiting for the opportunity, I cannot trust anyone anymore. I do not know how." "I cannot imagine how hard that is," Garrett said quietly. "Having your trust destroyed like that, having your safety stolen, there are no words for how wrong it is. You do not think I am being foolish, overreacting? No. The word came out flat, almost angry, and Amelia finally looked at him. His eyes were fierce. You are not foolish. You are not overreacting. You survived something terrible, and you are doing your best to keep surviving. Anyone who makes you feel bad about that is not worth your time. Something in Amelia's chest loosened, a knot she had not even realized was there. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Finally, Garrett said, "You do not owe me anything, and I do not expect anything from you. But if it helps to have someone around who understands you need time and space, I am here. However long it takes." "I am afraid of men," Amelia confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "After what they did, I cannot stand to be touched. Even thinking about it makes me feel sick." Garrett nodded slowly. "Then we will not touch, we will just sit, or talk, or not talk, whatever you need. Take all the time you need." And somehow, impossibly, that became the foundation of something real. Through the scorching weeks of August, they established a routine. Garrett would be waiting when she finished at the schoolhouse, and they would sit on the church steps and talk about safe things. The weather, the town's growth, the children's progress in school, the horses on his ranch. He told her about breaking colts, about the satisfaction of seeing a wild creature learn to trust. She told him about her favorite books, about the pleasure of watching a child's face light up when they finally understood a difficult concept. Slowly, incrementally, the distance between them on those church steps decreased. 3 feet became 2 feet, became 18 inches. Amelia found herself looking forward to those evening conversations, found herself disappointed on Sundays when school was not in session, and she had no excuse to see him. It was Mrs. Campbell who finally pointed out the obvious one evening in September. "You are falling in love with him, you know." Amelia nearly dropped the plate she was washing. "I cannot be. I do not do that anymore. I am too broken for that." "Love does not require you to be whole," Mrs. Campbell said gently, "and Garrett does not seem to mind your broken pieces. He is patient enough to wait while you glue yourself back together." The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Could she really open herself up to those feelings again? Could she trust someone with that vulnerable part of herself? The answer came unexpectedly on a cool October afternoon. Amelia was walking back from the general store, her arms full of supplies for the school's autumn festival, when a man she had never seen before grabbed her elbow to get her attention. It was not aggressive, not even particularly intrusive, just a stranger trying to ask directions. But Amelia reacted on pure instinct, dropping everything and stumbling backward with a strangled cry. The man held up his hands immediately, confusion and alarm on his face. "I am sorry, miss. I just wanted to know where the land office was." Amelia could not answer, could barely breathe. Her vision was graying at the edges, her chest painfully tight. Dimly, she heard running footsteps, and then Garrett was there, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the solid warmth of him. "Breathe with me," he said, his voice cutting through the panic. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You are safe. I am right here. Breathe." She focused on his voice, on the rhythm he was setting, and slowly, slowly the world came back into focus. The stranger had fled. Garrett was crouched in front of her, his hands carefully behind his back, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that anchored her. "There you are," he said softly when her breathing finally evened out. "You are okay, you are safe." "I am sorry," she gasped. "I am so sorry. I do not know why I fell apart like that. He just touched my arm and stop apologizing." Garrett's voice was firm but kind. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Your body remembers what happened to you and it is trying to protect you. That is normal. That is okay." Amelia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw in his face something she had not seen in any man since that terrible night in Missouri. Genuine compassion without expectation. He was not frustrated by her brokenness, not impatient with her healing, not resentful of her fear. He was just there, solid and steady and willing to wait as long as she needed. "I think I am starting to trust you," she whispered, and watched his eyes go soft. "That is the bravest thing I have ever heard," Garrett said. After that, something shifted between them. The trust Amelia had acknowledged grew deeper, stronger, a foundation they could build on. In November, when the first cold winds blew across the prairie, Garrett brought her a heavy wool shawl he said had belonged to his mother. She accepted it, and for the first time since arriving in Enid, she reached out and briefly touched his hand in thanks. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it felt monumental. "Was that all right?" she asked anxiously, and Garrett nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "That was more than all right, but only if it was all right for you." "It was terrifying," Amelia admitted, "but also nice. I had forgotten what nice could feel like." They took it slowly, so slowly. A brief touch of hands became holding hands for a few minutes at a time. Holding hands became sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. Each step forward was her decision, her timing, and Garrett never pushed, never suggested they move faster than she was ready for. The town noticed, of course. Small frontier communities had little entertainment beyond gossip. But Mrs. Campbell ran interference like a general defending a stronghold, shutting down speculation and judgment with a sharp tongue and steely eye. "That young woman has been through trials you cannot imagine," she told anyone who dared question the glacial pace of the courtship. "And Garrett Vance is a gentleman in every sense of the word. Leave them be." By December, Amelia could walk beside Garrett without flinching, could let him help her into a wagon without her heart racing, could sit beside him at church socials without the ever-present fear clawing at her throat. Progress was measured in tiny victories. A full conversation without her checking the exits, an evening where she laughed freely at one of his stories, a moment when she caught herself thinking about a future that included him. On Christmas Eve, the town held a celebration in the schoolhouse. Someone had brought in a scraggly pine tree, and the children had decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments. Carols were sung, cider was served, and for a few hours the harsh reality of frontier life was softened by community and joy. Amelia stood near the tree, watching the children play, when Garrett approached with 2 cups of cider. She accepted one with a smile that felt genuine, felt real in a way she had not thought possible 6 months ago. "I have something for you," Garrett said, pulling a small package wrapped in brown paper from his coat pocket. "I hope it is not too forward." Inside was a delicately carved wooden horse, no bigger than her palm. Every detail was perfect, from the flowing mane to the powerful legs. Amelia recognized it as the project he had been working on for weeks during their evening talks. "It is beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You made this." "I wanted you to have something to remind you that trust can be rebuilt," Garrett said quietly. "Horses are not so different from people. When they have been hurt, they need time and patience to believe it is safe to trust again. But they can learn. They do learn. And what they become after is stronger than what they were before." Amelia looked up at him, this man who had seen her at her most broken and had never once treated her as less than whole. "I am falling in love with you," she said, and the admission felt like shedding a weight she had carried too long. "It terrifies me, but it is true." Garrett's face transformed, hope and joy and something deeper all mingling together. "I have been in love with you since you sat down on those church steps and told me your truth," he said. "I will love you through the fear, through the healing, through whatever comes. I am not going anywhere. That night, walking back to the boarding house under a sky full of winter stars, Amelia let Garrett kiss her forehead. It was chaste, brief, but it was a beginning. The new year brought new challenges. January was brutally cold and the schoolhouse was drafty despite everyone's best efforts. Several families left Enid, unable to make their claims work, and Amelia lost some of her students. The town itself seemed to hunker down, waiting for spring. But through it all, Garrett was there. He courted her properly with a patience that would have been remarkable even without her history. He brought her wildflowers in the spring, took her on carefully chaperoned buggy rides in the summer, taught her to appreciate the vast beauty of the Oklahoma prairie. He never pressured her, never made her feel guilty for the boundaries she needed to maintain. On her birthday in March, he took her to his ranch for the first time. It was a modest operation, a sturdy house and barn with corrals full of horses in various stages of training. Amelia fell in love with a gentle mare named Daisy, and Garrett spent the afternoon teaching her to ride, his hands steadying her when she wobbled, his voice calm and encouraging. "I was thinking," he said as they walked Daisy back to the barn, "that if you were ever inclined to leave the boarding house, I could build you a cottage on the property. Separate from the main house, your own space entirely. You could come and go as you pleased, no expectations, no pressure. Just a place of your own where you would be safe." Amelia stopped walking, her heart hammering, but this time it was not from fear. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Eventually, I hope," Garrett said honestly, "but I am not asking that yet. I know you need more time, and that is fine. I just want you to know that when you are ready, I am here, and I am willing to do things however makes you most comfortable." It was so perfectly him, so considerate and patient, that Amelia felt tears sting her eyes. "Ask me again at Christmas," she said impulsively. "I think I might be ready by then." Garrett's smile could have lit the entire prairie. "I will hold you to that." The months between March and December felt both endless and far too short. Amelia worked on herself, on her healing, on reclaiming the parts of herself that had been stolen that terrible night in Missouri. She talked to the wives of local ranchers who had survived their own traumas, found strength in shared stories. She pushed herself to be a little braver each day, to trust a little more, to believe that not all men were monsters. And Garrett was patient through it all. When she had nightmares that left her shaking and unable to sleep, he sat on her porch and talked to her through the window until dawn. When she had good days where the fear seemed distant, he celebrated with her. He learned her triggers, her boundaries, her needs, and he respected every single one without complaint. In the fall, he started building the cottage he had promised, and Amelia helped plan every detail. It had large windows that let in plenty of light, a sturdy door with a lock only she would have the key to, and a small porch perfect for morning coffee. It sat about 100 yards from the main ranch house, close enough to feel connected but far enough to provide independence. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after she had confessed her love, Garrett proposed properly. They were in the cottage, which he had finished just days before, and he got down on one knee with a ring that had belonged to his mother. "Amelia Porter, you are the strongest, bravest person I have ever known. I love every part of you, including the parts that are still healing. I will spend every day of my life making sure you feel safe and valued and cherished. Will you marry me?" Amelia looked at him, this man who had taught her that love could be gentle, that patience was not a burden but a gift, that her trauma did not define her worth. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like freedom. They married in February of 1891, a small ceremony in the church where they had spent so many evenings talking. Mrs. Campbell wept happily through the whole thing. The town turned out to celebrate, filling the schoolhouse with food and music and goodwill. That night in the cottage that was now truly hers, Amelia took Garrett's hand and said, "I am still afraid sometimes. I might always be afraid sometimes." "I know," Garrett said gently, "and that is all right. We will figure it out together." Their marriage was not traditional in many ways. For the first months, Garrett slept in the main house while Amelia stayed in the cottage, both of them taking time to adjust to being husband and wife. Intimacy came slowly, carefully, always at her pace. There were setbacks, nights when she could not bear to be touched, days when the memories overwhelmed her. But Garrett never wavered, never made her feel broken or inadequate. "You are not a problem to be fixed," he told her one difficult evening. "You are a person who survived something horrific. You are allowed to take all the time you need to heal." Gradually, the good days outnumbered the bad ones. Amelia found that sharing her life with Garrett brought joy she had not thought possible. He made her laugh with his dry humor, challenged her with thoughtful conversations, supported her teaching career even when other men in town thought married women should not work. He was her partner in the truest sense, treating her always as an equal. In the spring of 1892, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The news brought a tangle of emotions: joy, fear, anxiety about her body being out of her control again, worry about passing her trauma to a child. Garrett listened to every fear, validated every concern, and promised they would face it all together. Their son was born in November, a healthy boy with his father's creek water eyes. They named him Matthew, and from the moment Amelia held him, she felt something in her heart knit back together. This was her family, built on a foundation of patience and trust and love that had been earned in tiny increments. The following years brought more children: a daughter named Sarah in 1894, twin boys named Jacob and Daniel in 1896. The cottage became too small, and they moved into the main house together, though Garrett always made sure Amelia had her own space, her own sanctuary she could retreat to when she needed. Teaching continued to fulfill her, and she became known throughout the region as an exceptional educator. The schoolhouse expanded twice, and Amelia trained 2 assistant teachers to help with the growing student population. She never forgot what it felt like to be afraid, and she watched her students with careful eyes, always alert for signs that a child might be suffering as she once had. Garrett's ranch prospered, his reputation for breaking horses with kindness rather than force spreading far beyond Enid. He taught his sons and daughter the same patience he had shown Amelia, raising them to be gentle with creatures and people who needed time to heal. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Amelia and Garrett sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. The Oklahoma sunset painted everything gold, and Amelia felt a contentment she once thought was lost to her forever. "Do you remember when I told you I was afraid of men?" she said quietly. Garrett took her hand, the gesture now as natural as breathing. "I remember." "I am not afraid anymore," Amelia said, turning to look at him. "You taught me that love does not have to hurt, that men can be kind, that trust can be rebuilt. You gave me back my life." "You did that yourself," Garrett said firmly. "I just held the space for you to heal. You are the one who did the hard work of putting yourself back together." "We did it together," Amelia corrected and kissed him softly. "Everything good in my life we built together." As the years continued to pass, the story of the schoolteacher and the patient cowboy became part of Enid's folklore. They were the couple who proved that love could overcome trauma, that healing was possible, that patience and kindness could build something beautiful from broken pieces. Amelia never forgot where she had come from, the terror that had once consumed her days. But she also never let it define her future. She turned her pain into purpose, her fear into strength, her broken pieces into a life worth living. And beside her through it all was Garrett, the man who had said take all the time you need and meant it with his whole heart. By the time they were old, silver-haired and bent with age, Enid had transformed from a rough frontier town into a proper city. Their children had children of their own, carrying forward the lessons of patience and love they had learned from their parents. The cottage where Amelia and Garrett had begun their married life became a haven for their grandchildren, a place where stories were told and love was celebrated. On a warm evening in the spring of 1940, Amelia and Garrett sat together on that same porch where they had shared so many conversations. They were both in their 70s now, their hands worn but still clasped together. "I never imagined this life when I stepped off that stagecoach," Amelia said softly. "I was so broken, so afraid. I thought I would spend the rest of my days just surviving." "But you did not just survive," Garrett said, his voice still gentle despite the years. "You thrived. You built a life full of purpose and love. You healed yourself and helped heal others." "Because of you," Amelia insisted. "Because you saw me at my worst and loved me anyway. Because you were patient when I needed patience, steady when I needed strength, gentle when I needed tenderness." Garrett kissed her forehead, the same gesture he had made that Christmas Eve so many years before. "I loved you from the first moment you sat on those church steps and trusted me with your truth. Everything after that was just me trying to be worthy of that trust." "You were always worthy," Amelia said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the Oklahoma prairie, the land they had made their home, the place where broken pieces had become beautiful. Their children and grandchildren filled the house behind them. Multiple generations gathered for Sunday dinner, carrying forward the legacy of love that had begun with a traumatized woman and a patient man who knew that healing could not be rushed. Amelia thought about the girl she had been, so afraid she could barely speak to a kind stranger. She thought about the long journey of healing, the setbacks and victories, the slow rebuilding of trust. She thought about all the moments, big and small, that had brought her to this evening, this life, this love. "I would not change a single thing," she said finally. "Not even the hard parts, because all of it brought me here to you, to this family, to this life. I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Garrett squeezed her hand gently. "As am I, always and forever as am I." And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Amelia Porter Vance knew with absolute certainty that she had found something rare and precious. A love built on patience, watered with kindness, and grown strong through years of unwavering commitment. She had survived the worst and found the best, and every day with Garrett was a reminder that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that love could indeed conquer fear. The little wooden horse Garrett had carved for her that first Christmas sat on the mantel inside, a permanent reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. And though the years had weathered them both, the love between them remained as steady and strong as it had been when a cowboy told a frightened woman to take all the time she needed, and then proved with his actions that he meant every word.